Hello, everyone. Let's go around the Big Ten here on May 29, 2025. I am Marc Givler, joined by Chip Minnich as always. First of all, Chip, how has your month of May been going? We are back here with another episode. We did have a bit of a layoff, but we recorded one early last week. We got another one coming up here today. Are we feeling like we're getting closer, right? I mean, official visits this weekend are kind of a big thing now around the country, and college camps are like a week off. Getting a little closer, aren't we?
Yeah, and I have to say that you asked about how the month of May. It's always nice knowing, even if you don't get everything you want, getting the first 3 weeks of the college football kickoff times for not just Ohio State, but for all the other Big Ten teams, getting an idea in terms of the games that I want to watch or the games I'm going to try and make an effort to watch. Getting that information today it's always welcome. It just means that we're getting closer and closer to the season starting.
Yeah. So we've kind of been talking about this for a while now. So we're actually going to get down to it here today. We'll release one of these today on the 29th, and we're going to release another one of these as we record here on the 29th. We're going to release another one of these on the 30th. So we are going to record and kind of break these up a little bit for everyone. But we're going to do our schedule analysis for 2025. We're going to look at each Big Ten team's schedule, and we're going to try and predict their record. We'll see how good we do on that. That's always going to be a challenge when you don't know what injuries are going to happen and everything else that can go on in a football season. But we're going to give kind of our early impressions on what a good record might be for each program, maybe a best case, worst case scenario situation. And maybe even get a little bit bold and, for certain teams, try and pick where they lose, where they win, etc. First up, we will start with Ohio State. We'll start with the national champs. We kind of waited pretty late with them on the spring preview, so we'll kind of start them early on the schedule analysis. And I think there's more stability there, like as far as their roster and everything else. I think there's less changes that can happen there versus maybe some other programs between now and August. But Chip, first of all, this is a challenging schedule, right? I mean, you can kind of pick fun at Grambling and Ohio U, but they start coming out of the gates. They host Texas. They have some really challenging road environments at Washington, at Illinois, at Wisconsin, and then of course up in Ann Arbor at the end of the season. What do you make of this for the defending national champions? I mean, this has some serious potholes on the schedule.
I think you hit it right on the head, Mark. I think, just to kind of, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think Ohio State, this is not going to come as a shocker to you or probably to any of our listeners. I am predicting Ohio State to be able to defeat Ohio U, but let's not forget the fact that Ohio U did win the MAC. Now, granted, they're going through some transition of their own with a new coach since Tim Albin left for Charlotte. But getting back to the main premise of Ohio State's season opener, when you're talking about the game against Texas, I mean, for all intents and purposes, that game pretty much went down to the wire last year in the college football playoff. Now, granted, just like Ohio State, Texas has lost a lot of talent, and I realize there's a lot of hype around Arch Manning, and I'm as excited as anybody to see how he plays. But this is probably, and I understand the fans' anger and frustration of the fact that it's a noon kickoff. This is probably as great a test for both teams to start off against each other, because this is going to be, you're not going to have to worry about either team coming into it kind of not necessarily having the focus and the motivation. Both Texas is coming in with revenge on their minds. With Ohio State, the fact that they are the defending national champion, but they know that they're going to get Texas's best effort right out of the gate. I think Ohio State should look at this opportunity as a tremendous motivation to defend their national championship in front of a national television audience on Fox.
Yeah, we won't harp on the big noon kickoff part of this and get everyone riled up on that. That's I think there's been enough of that. There will be plenty of time for that not being a primetime game. But in this, I can already see people rolling their eyes at this comment, but this almost feels like a play-in game.
No, I agree with you. I think
the winner of that game is so far ahead of the rest of the country, in my opinion, on an inside track on a playoff berth. It's not even funny.
Yeah, it's going to be. I certainly agree that it's going to be, if anything, not only a play-in game, but it'll certainly reflect eventually in the seedings. And we all know that the college football playoffs, it's going to be straight seeding going forward. And in this case, it's going to be the last year of a 12-team playoff. But if you're if you're Ohio State and you come out of that with a win, I don't care if it's by 1 point, 7 points, 10 points, that's going to reflect itself in the seeding. And same thing, obviously, if Texas comes out on the winning edge. So whoever wins that, they have to kind of look at it like, all right, we're going to be that much further ahead in terms of the seeding at the eventual conclusion of the season in December.
Yeah, it's a big game, obviously. I mean, well, I'm sure like once August rolls around, we will do like an in-depth preview of the game. Like this is more kind of a let's look at the schedules, let's kind of ballpark a record or whatever. But we'll do some more in-depth stuff on this. This will be one of the biggest games of the year, so we'll be talking about this a lot over the next few months. But just kind of initial thoughts on this, Chip, and you know, like who has the edge here? Because I could argue this either way.
Wow. You know something? I'm going to just give the edge to Texas for the simple fact that one of the biggest concerns I have as an Ohio State fan is at the defensive tackle position. And like you said, I'll have probably a better understanding in terms of once we get into fall camp and you start hearing from the practice reports. This is not meant to belittle or be overly judgmental of the defensive tackles on the Ohio State roster, but the depth and the experience at that crucial position along the defensive line is going to be lacking. So if I'm Texas going into this, I'm thinking that's going to be that I'm going to test that early and often if I'm Texas on offense. And I realized I was just talking about Arch Manning. I think that it's going to be giving him, I think he's going to have full reign of the offense, but I also believe if you're Texas, you're going to try to establish that running game to try and take the pressure off Arch Manning. So that's why my initial thought, I want to emphasize initial thoughts, is that Texas has the edge going into it, even though the game is in Ohio Stadium.
Yeah, it's one of those games where I'm probably taking the points, whoever's getting them. I think either team could win. I think Ohio State's like a 3-point favorite right now if you look at those early lines. But what I keep coming back to, I mean, the revenge factor is whatever. Like so many different players, I don't really look into that too much. What I kind of keep going back to is the quarterback position. And I'm a big kind of proponent of Julian Sayans, but he hasn't thrown one meaningful pass in a college football game. And it's not that like Arch Manning's coming into this with like 25 starts under his belt, but he started football games. He's been put into big games in key times. He's had weeks of prepping as the starter to get ready for a game. These are all things Julian Sayin has not done. So I think Ohio State is going to be at a little bit of a disadvantage. Like if this game was played week 10, I wouldn't even really think about this too much because then you're talking about, well, Arch Manning's got 15 starts under his belt and Sayin's got 10 starts. I mean, what's the difference there? But the fact that Sayin has not really thrown a competitive pass in a meaningful situation, I think gives Texas an advantage early in the season. The defensive line is interesting. You make an interesting point about Ohio State's defensive line. I think both teams are going to try to establish the run early, which may go against both head coaches' general philosophy. I think both coaches would love to just let it rip 50 times, but I think both teams are going to try a little bit. With Sayin, it's more of a what do we have here? How's he reacting thing to get the running game going to help maybe take the pressure off of him. With Arch, maybe it's more of a protect him from the crowd, from tough situations with the crowd. You don't want 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 10s. That crowd's going to get going. So I think both teams are going to try and establish the run early. And then with that said, that actually flips me back a little bit toward Ohio State because they've got, while I think Texas has outstanding running backs, I think it's at best for Ohio State, it's a wash at running back and maybe advantage Texas at running back. The offensive line, Texas is replacing a lot of guys on their offensive line. Ohio State's offensive line is supposed to be a strength of this team. It's, to me, the deepest offensive line they've had in a very long time. That pushes me kind of back toward Ohio State. So I can make whatever argument you'd want me to make, I could make for this game. So it'll be interesting to see again but I do think, the quarterback who handles the anxiety the best of this game, again, Arch, the crowd, the road situation, saying the first game jitters, is probably going to win this game. And I think what's going to happen is one of these quarterbacks will probably make a critical mistake in the second half, be it from pressure, from stress, whatever it might be, and that may turn this thing. But I personally can't wait for this game. Will it be 1 versus 2? I don't know. It may be like 1 versus 3 or 2 versus 3 or something like that. But it's going to be a big time game.
Oh, absolutely. And another X factor to keep in mind on the Ohio State side is, granted, he's been on the coaching staff for a number of years, but officially this is Brian Hartline kind of, his debut is against Texas as the offensive coordinator. And the speculation is that, all right, Ryan Day has learned that from last year that, all right, handing over the reins was a good thing, and he can focus on the entire team. And the end result was a national championship. My speculation is that Ryan Day is going to be a little bit more hands-on with Brian Hartline, simply because of the relationship that he had with Chip Kelly versus Brian Hartline's relative inexperience. Let's face it. I mean, I know that I'm not disputing what Ryan Day has said about Brian Hartline, that he's ready to do this and he's earned this and all those wonderful platitudes. But I'm kind of curious as it relates to a big game opponent like Texas in the season opener, if Ryan Day is going to be a little bit more involved on the offensive side. And conversely, on the defensive side of the ball, this is the debut of Matt Patricia at the college level. Now, if you're an Ohio State fan that has skepticism about Matt Patricia based on his results in the NFL, I can see why you might have some concern. I'm more on the idea of, all right, is Matt Patricia going to be trying to do too much at the college level compared to what he has experienced? He has no experience coaching at the college. I should say no. He has very limited coaching experience at the college level. It's been 20 some years since the last time he coached at the college level. And if he tries to do too much, kind of like what Greg Schiano sometimes was accused of doing when he was the defensive coordinator years ago. So those are some of the things that also kind of weigh in the back of my mind. Like you said, we'll have more time as it gets closer and closer to kickoff in August, but these are just some of the things that have me just kind of wondering how Ohio State's going to come out against such a highly ranked opponent in Texas.
Yeah, like neither of these teams get a scrimmage. Neither of these teams get a warm up against, Akron or,
right,
Stephen F. Austin or whatever. Like this is going to be like trial by fire. So it's going to be very interesting to see who's got their team ready. I think, again, the winner of that game is almost a virtual lock for the playoff, unless just their roster completely implodes due to injury, a few weeks later. But it seems to me like, again, and I think a lot of people will be talking about the winner of that game having the inside track on like being the favorite for the national championship. I just think that's going to be the narrative coming out of that game. But there's other landmines here for Ohio State. Again, we've kind of talked about like at Washington at the end of September. At least they get a bye before that, so maybe that eases things a little bit. Then you've got a pesky Minnesota team at home. Then you go at Illinois, at Wisconsin back-to-back weeks. And then you've also, again, you got Michigan there at the end in Ann Arbor. Let's put Michigan aside for a second.
Sure.
We kind of know the deal there. Where's the landmine there? Is it Washington? Is it Illinois? Is it Wisconsin? Is it even like is it Penn State at home? Where's the landmine?
I think it's Illinois. I think this is something that, when it comes to looking at that schedule, like you said, that I think, no disrespect, I think at Washington, that's going to be a more challenging game than I think Ohio State fans realize. I'm not suggesting that based on the spring game that you should be able to judge a team completely, but I did have an opportunity because it was one of the few Big Ten teams that actually televised their spring game. Washington certainly looks improved in year 2, and we talked about that previously. I think Washington will be a good test for Ohio State. The fact that they play Minnesota at home is a bonus. But Minnesota, PJ Fleck, year in, year out, his team
lives for these games.
He not only lives for these games, but his style of play is granted, it's not overly flashy, but very physical. It's going to be the kind of game where, all right, you have to be ready for some kind of a strong running game and maybe not necessarily a tremendous defense, but they're going to be playing you physically. The point I'm trying to make is that those games, now granted, there's a week in between when we're looking at the Ohio State schedule, the fact, excuse me, let me take that back. There's actually Ohio State has a bye going into the Washington game, and then they play Minnesota. The fact that then they go on the road to Illinois, the reason why you asked, like, in terms of a landmine, I think the consecutive effort of going on the road to Washington, playing a physical game against Minnesota could possibly take its toll on Ohio State. I think Illinois is going to be a very physical affair. So that would be, I'm not trying to discount, like you said, Michigan is Michigan. Penn State's going to be tough. But I just think that Illinois game is going to be something that Ohio State fans should not overlook. I think Illinois is going to be a real challenge.
Yeah, when I look at those like 3 games, and let's face it, like all the talk about Ohio State's schedule nationally is going to be around the beginning and end of their schedules. It's going to be around the Texas game to kick off the season, and they're going to skip straight to November and talk about home against Penn State and at Michigan in November. That stretch from late September to late October is sneaky, like difficult, like really like sneaky. Those are all losable games with the first-year starting quarterback, in my opinion.
Certainly.
Some more than others. Like, for example, I even with the crazy environment they're going to encounter in Madison, I don't think Wisconsin has the horses to play with them for 60 minutes. But you come back, like, first of all, Washington, I think they're going to be better this year. I think they're going to be much better this year. That is scarily like one of the best home environments in college football, like sneakily one of the best home environments in college football. I think they have like a 20-some game home winning streak. They've got like some crazy, like, I don't know if it's non-conference or I have to double check that, but they've got some crazy winning streak at home. And again, it's a nightmare place to go. And that's going to be Julian Sain's first road start. He'll learn something from the Texas game a few weeks before that. But I think that's a landmine, and I think Illinois is a landmine because I think Illinois is both really good. I think Illinois is also catching them at a good point in the schedule. And I also think that, I don't know that Champaign, Illinois is maybe necessarily considered like one of the top 10 environments in college football, but on that Saturday, that has a chance to be one of the greatest environments you'll ever see if Illinois takes care of its business leading up to that game. That's going to be the biggest game in program history, or the biggest game in recent program history. I mean, that's going to be the biggest game that team has played in a program's played in a long time. So there's a lot of landmines there. So with that said, Chip, like, what's a best case, worst case scenario? Regular season, we won't get into like playoff and Big Ten championship stuff. Like 12-game record, regular season. What's like a best case, worst case scenario for you for Ohio State in 2025?
Oh, I mean, best case is they run the table, and I realize that that's kind of lofty. But when you look at the talent on hand, even though we just talked about the challenges and difficulties of the Ohio State schedule, it's certainly within their grasp to do it. I would say that would be best case. I would say worst case, I would say the floor for the talent and again, knock on wood, avoiding injuries, any kind of, cataclysmic occurrences that, freak occurrences that we're not anticipating. I would say the floor for this team would probably be about 3 losses. I would say, that's kind of where I would see it. And that kind of includes the fact that, we're talking about opening up against Texas, going on the road to Illinois, finishing up on the road in Ann Arbor. That's kind of, and I'm not suggesting, by the way, that those are going to be the losses. I'm just saying that just based on the inexperience at the quarterback position, I just think that my concerns about the defensive line going into the season, that's kind of where I'm coming up with, like, at the floor being like 3 losses.
Yeah, I look at the schedule, and it's not a reflection on what I think about Ohio State. I think it's more of a reflection on what I think about their schedule and what I think about the teams on this particular schedule that they've drawn here with the Big Ten. And I see more losable games on this schedule than I've seen in probably several years. That being said, so I have a thing, and I'll stick to this. And my goodness, I think have I ever been wrong on this? I don't think I have. I don't think I've ever been wrong on this. I've never picked Ohio State to go undefeated for the entire season, start to finish. So now this is a little different because I'm not counting play. I usually count playoffs and everything in that. Mm-hmm. But I've never, since I've been doing it, so the last 15 years, I always say they're going to lose a game. So I'm putting their ceiling at 11-1. They're going to lose a game. They always do. When do they not? They pretty much always do. There's been a couple 12-0s they've put up, but they've never done a 15-0 or anything like that. So at least since obviously the Tressel team did, but that was right. My God, I was a senior in high school. So, I'm putting their ceiling at 11-1, and I'll go a step further on that because first-year starting quarterbacks are generally going to lose you a game. They just are. They're going to have 2 or 3 really bad games, and you just hope they're against the right opponents on the right Saturdays that you can overcome it. But normally they're going to get you once. They're just going to have a bad game. C.J. Stroud had a very poor game against Oregon at home early in his career. It kind of cost him. It just always happens. So I think that's going to happen at some point. I agree with you on the floor. I think it's 9-3. There's probably 6 games that I could look at and be they could lose that game if they don't do this, this, and this. But realistically, to think they would lose 4 or 5 games, I think is, with that talent, with that coaching staff, is kind of preposterous. So I'm with you on the floor. I think the floor is 9-3. I think the ceiling's 11-1. Now, I will say this before everyone kind of runs on the comments and on the Twitter and says, "Oh, Givler's saying Ohio State's going to go 9-3 and they're going to lose. They could lose 6 games and they're this, that, and the other." I think the ceiling is more likely than the floor. I think now, if you gun to my head, okay, you have to get their exact record, I would probably say 10-2, but I think 11-1 is more likely than 9-3. But we'll see. I think this is a really good team. I think it's a national championship contending team. It's for me a virtual lock at the playoff. I think even if they went 9-3, there's with seeding kind of being straight now, and I know there's still some auto bids and things like that, but I think you're gonna have a hard time keeping a 9-3 Ohio State team out of this thing unless there's just so many 1-loss, 2-loss teams out there. But their schedule, I think, is going to insulate them from a lot of mistakes that they can make. Give them maybe a wider margin for error than usual. But yeah, I think somewhere between 9-3, 11-1, with 11-1 more likely than 9-3. People, I think that is probably the range for me. And then we'll finish up with this because this is the last game of the season. So we'll finish up with it. Do they get over the Michigan hurdle, which is hilarious to say right now? This is a team that beat the life out of Michigan for almost 20 years, and now we're talking about there being a mental block against Michigan. Do they get over that this year? Because I've got a theory on this, but I want to hear your thoughts first, Jeff.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that they do. And here's my thinking on it is I think my rationale behind this is even though the game is in Ann Arbor, I really do believe last year the way that game, and I'm sorry, I'm still when I replay that mentally in terms of what happened and how it happened, that game that'll be the game that Ryan Day will just forever be kind of just shaking his head in terms of how did we possibly lose this game, even though the game is in Ann Arbor and it's at noon on Fox. That was one of the games that was announced. Not a big surprise in terms of the kickoff time. I just believe that the mental hurdle that even though a lot of the players from last year's team have moved on to the NFL, I think there are enough guys on this year's team that they know what it takes in terms of that playoff run. And I'm going to say, at the end of May, without seeing a lot of Michigan, they had a spring game on Big Ten Network, but I wasn't overly impressed with what I saw. I'm gonna say that Ohio State gets past that mental block and that they get back on the winning side of things.
Yeah, I have two kind of thoughts on this and why I do think they're going to beat Michigan this year. And before I even get into that, Michigan's an interesting team this year. On paper, they're less talented, yet it's hard to see them having a worse season than they had last year. In terms of their final record, it's a very weird team for me to wrap my brain around this year. They've lost a lot of guys to the NFL, and I know they didn't have Will Johnson last year for most of last year. You know, Colson Loveland was in and out of the lineup at times, but on paper they should be less talented this year. But it's hard for me to wrap my brain around them going, being worse. Going like 6-6 or 5-7. That would just be strange to me. So I'm still trying to like jostle with all that and try and form a real coherent thought on what I think Michigan's going to actually be this year. But there's two things. One, last year's loss to Michigan felt very different to me from some of the other ones. I think a lot of the other ones you could kind of lay the blame at the feet of the defense, whether it be ball control, allowing Michigan to just control the entire second half on the clock, not forcing any punts in the second half, not giving up 40 points a couple of times, or mid-30s several times. Like, last year was such a shockingly poor offensive game plan that Ryan Day's had like a couple of those, and every coach does to an extent, but like Ryan Day's had a couple of those over the years, and every time he does, he like makes up for it at some point. Like, everyone was like, well, like the Georgia game a few years ago, everyone was like, well, kind of getting on Ryan Day about the offense, and they come out and like throw it all over the yard and put up 1 billion points on the best defense in college football in probably like the last decade. So I think they will get an aggressive Ryan Day from an offensive standpoint, whether that's him taking over some play calls or him just kind of with Hartline throughout the season, throughout the week, saying, look, we're going to be aggressive. So I think they're going to get the best version of Ryan Day, the aggressive version of Ryan Day, the let it rip version of Ryan Day, which I always prefer. As I've said a million times about Ryan Day, go be a 7-on-7 team. Stop worrying about people not calling you soft or physical. It doesn't matter. You won the national championship and people are still calling you soft. Like, there's nothing you can do at this point. You could win every game by 100 points and shut out everybody defensively. No one's not going to call – people calling you soft are going to keep calling you soft. It's what people do. So stop worrying about that. So I think they're going to get the amped-up version of Ryan Day. I also think – and this is going to sound a little crazy, but I do think there's going to be a lot of truth to this. When you look at the veterans on that team, at this point they've all accomplished everything you can accomplish on a college football field, except for like beating Michigan, winning the Big Ten. I think there's going to be so much energy put into that where it's like, you know what? If we win the national championship, if we go back to back, I mean, that's great, but like, we got to beat Michigan. Like, I feel like last year, like, there was like, this is a national championship team. It was national championship or bust. That was like the mantra in the spring last year was it wasn't Michigan or beat Michigan or bust. It was national championship or bust. They went out in the portal. They got Caleb Downs. They got Quinshon Judkins. They got Will Howard. They added that to that great talent they already had. And they said, we have to win a national championship. I don't think that's the mantra. I've been around. It's not the mantra at all this year. Now, they want to repeat. Of course, you want to win every game you play. I'm not saying that. But I think if you took a very quiet, off-the-record poll, anonymous poll in that locker room and said, you can win the national championship again, but you lose to Michigan, or you're a playoff team, you come up short on the repeat, but you beat Michigan, I think people would be shocked how high the beat Michigan thing registers with people in that locker room, in that facility. And so I think they're going to put in – I think it's all about beating Michigan this year. I really do. I think they won their championship. They're kind of playing with – some of these guys are playing with some house money at this point now with that. I think this is all about beating Michigan this year. And then the national championship almost becomes secondary. Do you disagree with that? I mean, I could be
No.
People thinking I'm absolutely insane. I mean, it's very possible, but
no, I just think, I mean, again, kind of, showing my age, when I think of last year, how shocking that loss to me, like the closest equivalent that I can give from my personal point of view was the 1996 home loss, like that one was just an inexplicable. How in the hell could you possibly lose to this team? Now, granted, that team had clinched the Big Ten, and then they went out and laid an egg against Michigan in the season, regular season ender for both teams. And this was obviously like pre-Big Ten championship game and pre-playoff era and that kind of thing. I think when it comes to going up to Ann Arbor, this is going to be, in some ways, it's not the same thing as the 310 days, but it feels to me that this team just kind of, like you said, Mark, I think that they have a motivation there to go up to Ann Arbor and kind of right some wrongs, kind of get things back the way that they believe it should be. And I think that the winning the national championship was a hurdle for last year's team, like you said, national championship or bust. And I think they not that they were improperly motivated, but I think the focus this year on beating Michigan is right where it needs to be. And there's just enough healthy mixture of guys that want to get this. They want to get this off the losing end of the spectrum and back to the way that they believe Ohio State should be handling things against Michigan.
Yeah, I just think the mentality has changed from national championship or bust. Anything else we do in the meantime is icing on the cake, to beat Michigan or bust. Anything we do outside of beating Michigan is icing on the cake. I just think it's flipped a little bit. That's all. And I think we see that. But we'll see. Again, we'll do more deep dives into some of these games and things throughout the fall. And, of course, in August, we'll be talking a lot about the Texas game. But I just want to do a quick, again, so we're both on record. 9-3 is the floor for Ohio State this year. I've got 11-1 as the ceiling. You've got 12-0 as the ceiling. So we're on record there. Maybe we'll reevaluate in August and be like, hey, any changes? But that's our first schedule analysis. We got 17 more of these things coming.
17 more.
All right, 1 down, 17 to go. So stick here with us on the YouTube channel, and thanks everyone again for watching and listening. We'll talk to you again soon.